Hi, my name's Venus. I was told there wasn't enough space for me at our family retreat. Again, no call, no invite, just silence, and a flyer with my sister's name listed as creative director on a logo I designed. Turns out they'd quietly removed me from the family trust, erased my name from the estate, and rebranded our legacy without me. What happens when the people who raised you start rewriting the story without you? And what if, this time, you refuse to stay invisible? Let me tell you what really happened. The sun had just crept over the rooftops when I opened my eyes. Usually, mornings like this were loud. Group chats pinging nonstop with family updates, carpool plans, reminders to bring favorite dishes and games for the Ridge family retreat. But today? Silence. My phone was blank. No, can't wait to see you, from Amanda. No, bring your watercolor kit, from Lorraine. Just silence, and that awful hum that fills the room when no one's thinking of you. I didn't panic. Not yet. I padded barefoot to the kitchen, started the kettle, and scrolled through my inbox. Nothing. Not even junk mail. Not a whisper of a calendar invite. Not a message. I refreshed the page again. Then again. Finally, one email popped up in bold. Retreat info. I clicked it faster than I'd like to admit. It was from Mom. The body of the email read, "We've decided to keep this year's gathering intimate. Just the core family. We figured you'd appreciate the quiet. Love, Mom." I stared at the screen. The words blurred. Not because I was crying, but because I couldn't believe how casual she made it sound, like doing me a favor by cutting me out. I didn't hit reply. I didn't throw the mug across the room like I wanted to. I just sat there, kettle shrieking behind me, and let the water burn off on its own. Around noon, a cousin of mine, Tasha, sent me a DM on Instagram. Casual, like she didn't know what was happening. "Hey, your mom told Aunt Sharon you were taking a mental break. Didn't want the noise. Hope you're okay." Excuse me? That's when it hit me. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd rewritten the narrative so they wouldn't look bad. I wasn't the victim. I was unstable. I wasn't left out. I had opted out. Like they were doing me a kindness. That word, mental break, clung to the inside of my ribs like a splinter. I never said anything like that. No one asked me. No one even hinted at an invitation. I closed my phone and walked to the back room of my apartment. My studio. It wasn't fancy, just shelves stacked with paints and markers and 3 half-used sketchbooks. But it was mine. I pulled out one from the bottom shelf, the old one I used back when I was still in school. Flipping through it was like touching another life. There it was, a sketch of the Ridge Lake cabin from the summer I was 17. The porch railing I helped repaint, the rowboat Grandpa taught me to steer. None of it had changed, except me. I remembered one summer, maybe 3 years ago, they told me there was no room for a single adult, that all the cabins were full. The following week, I saw photos online. Aunts, uncles, even second cousins from New Jersey. Someone's college roommate had come, but apparently no room for me. Another year, I asked what time the shuttle left. They said they must have forgotten to book my flight. Said it like they'd misplaced a dinner fork. Just an oversight. And again, photos went up, smiling faces on the dock, kids running down the hill I used to paint from. There was always an excuse, always a logistical issue that somehow only applied to me. One time over dinner, my father leaned back and laughed, wineglass in hand. He looked right at me and said, "She's too sensitive for the real world. Let her paint." The room roared, even Lorraine. I smiled like it didn't land, but it did. It still does. I didn't cry that night either. I didn't scream, but that was the first time I felt something start to settle inside me, like a line being drawn, quiet and sharp. Now, years later, reading that email, seeing my own family sell me the same lie in a new wrapper, it didn't shock me, but it broke something final. I closed the sketchbook, pushed my chair back, and walked to the hall closet. I pulled out a small duffel, not a suitcase, just enough room for a few clothes, my tablet, charger, and one pair of decent shoes. No makeup bag. No jewelry. Just enough to disappear for a day or two, maybe. Then I opened my laptop and began drafting an email. Not to them, to myself. Subject line: "This ends here. No body text, just those words." I saved it as a draft, then deleted it from my sent folder. I didn't need them to see it. I just needed to mean it. As evening rolled in and the golden light crept across my apartment walls, I stood at the window looking out over the Denver skyline. Somewhere across the lake in Granby, they were setting up for another small, intimate gathering, probably stringing up lights and picking out wine, probably not even mentioning my name. But I wasn't going to let that be the story this year. I turned off the light, picked up my sketchbook again, and flipped to the back. A blank page. Clean. Room for something new. I didn't sleep well the night after I packed my bag. Even after shutting my laptop and pushing my phone face down on the counter, my thoughts kept humming, circling the same ache like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline the following evening, I'd barely left the apartment. I kept pacing, between the kitchen and the window, back to the table, where my sketchbook still lay open to a blank page. Still no plan. Just that stubborn knot in my chest that said, "Not this year." Around 9, I made tea I didn't drink and took it out onto the balcony. The night was warm but quiet, the kind that usually calms me down. But not that night. That night, I did what I shouldn't have done. I opened Instagram. It started like it always does, tapping through random stories, mostly friends from college, ads for ceramic paint sets, photos of dogs and bandanas. Then I saw it, a grainy photo from my cousin Hannah's feed. It was a picture of the welcome table at the Ridge Family Retreat. A laminated sign stood front and center. Annual Ridge Family Retreat. Confirmed attendees, 97. I blinked. 97. Not 20. Not just the core family, like Mom's email had claimed. I tapped to pause the story and zoomed in. The image was blurry, but the names were real. There was Lorraine, of course, and Amanda, all their spouses. Even Great Uncle Howard, who lives 3 states away and hasn't remembered my name since 2004. And right there, just under special guests, Silas Cray. Silas. My stomach dropped. The same man my parents had forbidden me to see after college. "He's not Ridge material," Dad had said, whatever that meant. I hadn't spoken to Silas in years, but there he was, smiling in the photo below that post, arms slung casually around Amanda's husband, like they were old fraternity brothers. I stared at the screen until my tea went cold. Then I picked up my phone and, before I could think better of it, typed out a message to Lorraine. Didn't realize we were inviting ghosts now. I didn't expect her to reply, and she didn't. I kept scrolling. The next post was a video, a short clip from the first dinner. Lorraine stood at the head of the long table set up by the lake, glass of wine in hand, her voice perfectly modulated for effect. "To family," she said, raising her glass. "The ones who show up and always make space." They clinked glasses, laughed, cheered. I just sat there, phone in hand, in a silence that felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. It was never about space. It was never about logistics. It was about control, about optics, about curating who belonged and who didn't. The more I thought about it, the more the memories started lining up like dominoes. I remembered the bridal shower I wasn't told about, the Christmas card they posted where I was photoshopped out, cropped for layout, they'd claimed, the baby shower where my RSVP got lost, and Lorraine had smiled and said, "Oh, we figured you were probably busy with whatever it is you do." This wasn't a one-off. This was a pattern, and this time, they'd just done it in public. They'd put the list in writing, they'd posted the photos, they'd toasted to the people who always make space, and they knew I'd see it. That's when the hurt started turning into something else. Not rage, no, that would have been easy, but clarity. Cold and clear. They weren't sorry. They weren't hiding it. They were proud of it. They were shaping the story where I didn't exist. And they were hoping I'd be too ashamed or too exhausted to contradict it. That meant I didn't owe them silence anymore. I stood up from the balcony chair, went inside, and powered up my laptop. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Retreat, My Version. No documents inside yet, no images, no sketches, just the name. But that was enough. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't reacting. I was designing. I didn't know what this was going to become yet. I didn't know how big or small it needed to be. All I knew was I couldn't stay invisible and also expect to be remembered. If they were going to write me out of their version of this family, I was going to make sure I had mine. With my own words, my own art, my own table. However small, however quiet. I shut the laptop, laid down on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. They'd made their message loud. I'd make mine clear. After shutting the laptop and letting the silence settle around me, I spent most of the next day in a strange sort of limbo. I didn't paint. I didn't answer calls. I didn't even go down to check the mail. Instead, I drifted through thoughts, unfinished ideas, half-buried memories that started crawling back now that I had opened the door. That night, I didn't sleep much. And the next morning, instead of trying to push through the fog with caffeine and fake productivity, I tossed a few things into a backpack, grabbed a water bottle, and drove west, out toward the hills that curved around the edges of Granby. I didn't head toward Ridge House. I didn't even consider it. Instead, I followed a smaller road that led to an old trail I used to walk when I stayed with Grandpa as a kid. It wasn't far from where the retreat was being held, but it might as well have been a different world. That house by the lake? It was once where I learned to draw. I remember the exact day. I was 8. Grandpa had handed me a sketch pad, not some childish coloring book, but the real thing, and said, "What you see matters, Venus. Capture it before it disappears." It had never occurred to me that things could vanish until he said it like that. At the time, I thought he meant sunsets or shadows, or the way pine trees looked when the light hit them in the evening. But now, standing near the same path I used to walk barefoot, I knew better. He'd meant everything, places, people, the way a family once felt. I sat on a boulder under a familiar pine, one I had drawn dozens of times before, and took out my phone. It was habit by now, scrolling just to keep the restlessness at bay. But that habit came with consequences. A short video clip popped up in my feed. Not from Lorraine directly, of course, but tagged by one of her friends. It was a drone shot, clean, slow, and professionally edited. The caption read, "Our family's legacy, reimagined. Welcome to Ridge House." I didn't need the sound. The visuals were enough. New signage, faux rustic fencing, whitewashed siding. The wraparound porch had been extended and fitted with modern lighting. And at the edge of the lake, a pergola had been added. It looked like something out of a catalog. Then the shot panned to the lawn. A group of people gathered under a tent. Lorraine stood in front, holding a paintbrush. Her voice carried in that familiar way she used when she was about to perform sincerity. A subtitle overlaid the video read, "A Family Tradition of Creativity." I dropped my phone. My hand was still shaking when I picked it up. My breath was shallow. For a moment, I thought I might pass out. That place, our place, had been made over like a backdrop for a brand partnership. It didn't even look like the home I remembered. And now it was being used as the symbol of legacy, led by the same sister who made sure I had no seat at the table. I didn't hesitate. I tapped Lorraine's name and hit call. She picked up on the second ring. "Wow," I said without a hello. "That video looks great. Ridge House? That what we're calling it now?" She didn't pause. "It's not just me, Venus. Everyone agreed it needed a refresh." "You mean everyone you let in the door?" A quiet beat. I took a breath. "Why didn't you just tell me you didn't want me there? I'm not stupid, Lorraine." Her tone dropped, flat and polished. "Because that's not how this works. We choose what energy we invite. You're complicated." There it was. Polite cruelty. The kind that makes you question whether you've imagined the knife being twisted. Before I could respond, she hung up. I didn't scream, didn't call her back. I just sat there, thumb resting on the screen, realizing the weight of what had just been said. Complicated. That word was their favorite lately, a tidy label for people who refused to play along, who remembered things others preferred to forget, who didn't smile through humiliation or disappear quietly. By late afternoon, I was still in the same spot, trying to steady myself when I stood and began to walk. I followed the trail up a slope that ended near the ridge above the lake. There, just barely in view through a line of trees, was Ridge House. From this distance, it looked serene, picturesque, the kind of place tourists would book for authentic lake experiences. But to me, it looked hollow, like a memory that had been edited so heavily it no longer resembled the truth. I found the old pine tree I used to draw from. I sat down at its base, let my fingers rest in the dirt. The view used to be wide open here. Now it was lined with fences. New no trespassing signs were posted. Even the lake, something I once believed belonged to all of us, felt like it had been privatized. I took out my phone again, not to scroll, this time to speak. I opened the voice memo app and hit record. "This place raised me," I said softly, watching the sun start to dip behind the trees. "But I don't live here anymore. And if no one remembers me in their story, I'll make sure I don't forget myself." I didn't know who the message was for yet, but I knew I needed it. As I hiked back to the car, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, assuming it was spam. But then a text came through. "Check your email. You should know what they've really done." Back in the driver's seat, heart thumping low and slow, I opened my inbox. There it was. No subject. One attachment. A PDF. Legal letterhead. The PDF loaded slowly. My Canyon cell signal was weak, and I hadn't joined Wi-Fi yet. When the page finally opened, my chest tightened. I hadn't expected to see my own handwriting. There it was. A beautifully styled event flyer for the Ridge Retreat, framed with watercolor florals. Beneath it, an itinerary, speaker list, and a color-coordinated menu. And right in the center, my logo. Not something similar. Not a knockoff. Mine. Every detail matched the original design I'd created 5 years ago, a personal branding school project. I'd redesigned the Ridge Retreat identity just for fun, as a tribute to something that used to matter to me. I never published it. I'd only shared it with Lorraine. She'd asked to see it, for reference, to pitch to Dad. Now, there it was, stripped of my name. Under the logo, Creative Director, Lorraine Duval. I sat still, the screen glowing in my face. I let it hit me. Not just stolen, rewritten. I wasn't just omitted, I'd been replaced. I called my mother, not Lorraine. I needed clarity first. She picked up quickly, sweet as always. "Did you know they used my logo for the retreat?" I asked calmly. A pause. Not confusion, just calculation. "Well, that was years ago," she said lightly. "I assumed you'd moved on. Lorraine had it cleaned up professionally." "I made that," I said. "It was mine." She sighed. "Honey, don't make this a scene. You always read conflict where there isn't any." I hung up, not out of anger, but to avoid giving her words she'd twist later. I'd been down that road before. "She's reactive," they'd say, always so dramatic. I opened a folder on my old Gmail, Retreat Rebrand. There it was. Every file, sketch, timestamp, and draft. Proof it was mine. I uploaded everything to a private Google Drive titled Legacy Theft, Ridge Retreat 202X. I wasn't planning to go public, yet. I just needed the truth in one place, before it got rewritten again. At the bottom of an old sketchbook, I found the original pencil draft. In the margin, I'd written, "Ridge Legacy, not a brand, a promise." I'd believed that once, that families didn't erase each other, that if you made something beautiful, it would be recognized. That legacy meant truth. Then came a new email. No subject. One attachment. A screenshot of an internal memo. The sender. From Wendell Ridge to Legal Ridge Holdings. Subject. Estate consideration. Executorship. I read the text slowly. Given Venus's history with emotional volatility and inconsistent career direction, I believe it's in the family's best interest to finalize Lorraine as sole executor of the Ridge property and brand assets. I'd like this expedited before the next retreat. Emotional volatility. Not inclusion, not conversation, just dismissal. I wasn't just forgotten, I was disqualified, labeled unstable, dangerous to the brand. The irony was sharp. They'd erased me, then blamed me for not being there. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just felt cold. Years ago, I might have doubted myself, let their words shake my sense of reality. But not anymore. I wasn't unstable, I was inconvenient. And inconvenient people don't fit into neat family narratives. They get edited out. I walked slowly around my apartment. The walls were bare except for 3 of my framed works. None of them hung perfectly. I'd never used a level. I liked seeing where things tilted on their own. Back at my desk, I searched my legal contacts and found a name. Elizabeth Marrow, a friend's intellectual property attorney. I didn't call her, not yet. I wasn't planning to sue, but I was done pretending it didn't matter. The knock came before sunrise. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop still open from the night before, when I heard the soft, almost tentative sound against the door. I hadn't ordered anything, and no one in my life showed up this early without texting first. So I waited a second, hesitant, then got up slowly and peered through the peephole. A courier? Anonymous. No uniform, no company badge. Just a man in a windbreaker holding a padded envelope with my name handwritten on the front. He didn't speak, just nodded once and left. Inside was a folded letter and a black flash drive taped to a piece of cardstock. No signature. Just one sentence typed in plain black font. You'll want to see this before you act. There was no hesitation in me anymore. Not the kind that used to keep me second-guessing. I walked straight to my desk, powered up the laptop again, and inserted the drive. The file launched automatically. A video. Grainy, time-stamped, and unmistakably real. There he was, Grandpa Robert, sitting in his weathered chair on the Ridge porch, the old cedar frame creaking beneath him. He was wearing the same tan cardigan he always wore when the air got cooler, the one that smelled like pine and pipe tobacco. The camera was shaky at first, then steadied, as if someone had finally set it down on a nearby railing. His voice was softer than I remembered, but full of that old weight. Some things don't belong in contracts, he said. They belong in memory. And I hope this place, when I'm gone, is held by someone who remembers why we built it. He looked off to the side, and then, gently, as if he were reminding the wind itself, Venus, you'll be the one to carry this. You see it differently. There was a small laugh behind the camera. Mine. The date stamp was clear, 6 months before he passed. I watched it twice, then once more. Not because I needed convincing, but because I wanted to feel it, to absorb the sound of his voice as a form of armor, to remind myself that someone, once, had seen me, had believed in what I saw. By the time the screen dimmed again, the sun had started to rise, brushing across the walls of my apartment. I opened a new folder on my desktop, titled it Proof, Granby 200X. Inside, I dragged the scan of the original will, screenshots of my logo sketches, email chains with Lorraine, my time-stamped Illustrator files, the PDF of Dad's memo to the lawyer. And now, this video. I sent the folder to Elizabeth Marrow, the IP attorney. I didn't include a request, just a subject line. We need to talk. An hour later, she called. Her voice was calm, clipped, and exactly what I needed. The document you received, the will, it's valid, she said. Fully notarized, never legally rescinded. It's still logged in county records, Which means, I still have legal ownership? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. At least 1/3, she confirmed, and the moral high ground. They'll have a tough time spinning this without getting messy. I leaned back in my chair. The apartment was quiet again, but this silence didn't feel like erasure. It felt earned. Can we hold off on any formal action? I asked. For now? Of course, she said, but you should start documenting any public usage of the branding, press kits, media coverage, that kind of thing. I'm already on it. And I was. I opened the Google Drive folder I'd created days earlier, Retreat, my version, and renamed it Reclamation. There was still no grand plan, but there was movement, a slow, deliberate build toward something bigger than retaliation. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a reckoning, not just for me, but for the truth. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to exist. That afternoon, I went through my inbox again, scanning for updates from Ridge Holdings, the family's LLC. Their website still listed Lorraine as creative director, with no mention of me. The press release about the new rebrand was full of language that made my stomach turn. An evolution of tradition. Rooted in family, reimagined for the future. I clicked on the contact form and left a message. You've failed to credit the original artist behind your visual identity. Documents available upon request. Then I hit send. Later that evening, after taking a walk through City Park and clearing my head, I returned to find a voicemail on my phone. It was Lorraine. You're seriously going to make this about a logo? Venus, come on! This is just your pattern, isn't it? Blowing things out of proportion, dragging the rest of us through your drama. We've all tiptoed around you for years. Maybe it's time you asked why. I didn't respond. I wouldn't. Not to her. Instead, I crafted a single text and sent it to her direct line. If you plan on standing in front of the family this weekend, you might want to check who still owns the stage. It was never about space. It was about erasure. And I was done being erased. After sending that text to Lorraine, I didn't sit and wait for a response. I opened my laptop, found the folder labeled Reclamation, and exported a short compilation video I'd edited the night before. Silent, less than 2 minutes, and deliberate. Footage of my sketchbook pages, the time-stamped Illustrator files, the scanned will with my name circled. A slow fade-in of Grandpa's video, just the moment he says, Venus, you'll be the one to carry this. Then black screen. I uploaded it to a private Instagram account I'd created the week prior. Legacy rewritten. No hashtags, no commentary, just a caption. The truth isn't complicated, it's just inconvenient. I set the privacy to restricted, only a handful of followers. Lorraine, Dad, 2 of my cousins. I wanted them to see it, not the world, not yet. This wasn't for public applause. It was a warning. I put my phone down, made a cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the balcony. It was already warm, too warm for May, and the neighborhood was slowly waking up. Dog walkers, the humming garbage truck, someone starting a lawnmower far off in the distance. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Blocked number, voicemail. Dad. Venus, I saw what you posted. Let me be very clear. You don't understand how any of this works. You're playing with matches near gasoline. You don't want to start a public fight you can't win. He paused, long enough that I could hear him take a breath, not out of sadness, out of frustration. Family matters stay inside the family. Don't forget that. I didn't flinch. I didn't delete it. I forwarded the message to my attorney. Then I texted Dad back. Then you shouldn't have turned me into a stranger. It wasn't a dramatic line. It was the plain truth. And if there's one thing men like my father hate more than defiance, it's clarity. Later that afternoon, a new email arrived from Lorraine. The subject line, clarification. Of course it was. She never called. She never asked how I was. Just typed her words like a PR rep calming a minor scandal. As the creative lead on this year's retreat, I was unaware you felt ownership of the original design. I was under the impression it was a shared legacy contribution. Please let me know if this is a legal matter. I stared at the screen. My hands didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. I replied with no greeting, no closing. Ownership is a fact, not a feeling. I didn't wait for her next move. I set up a face-to-face with Elizabeth, my attorney. I needed a real conversation, not just about paperwork, but about lines, boundaries, what could and couldn't be done, what should and shouldn't be said out loud. We met at her office just outside downtown. It was a quiet space, neat, professional, full of muted tones and clean lines. She poured coffee without asking, which I appreciated. I don't want to sue, I told her, after laying out all the files. You don't have to, she said, but we should draw a line, a legal one. She suggested a cease and desist, no public use of my design, no marketing that implied unanimous family legacy, and a demand that my name be restored as a founding creative on anything that used my original work. It wasn't revenge. It was architecture. It was rebuilding the ground beneath my own name. The letter went out that evening, not aggressive, just precise. That night, as I was brushing my teeth, I got 3 separate DMs from cousins, people who hadn't messaged me in years. We always knew that was your logo. Thanks for standing up for yourself. Some of us wish we had. Lorraine told the interns to scrub your name from everything this week. I thought you should know. The last one included a screenshot from an internal Slack thread. Lorraine's profile pic next to a message that read, "Make sure Venus's name isn't referenced during the art tour. We're avoiding tension." Avoiding tension. As if my existence was a scheduling issue. I didn't reply to any of them, but I did screenshot it and save it in my folder. Titled it, Intent to Erase. That was Friday evening. By Saturday morning, I was in my car, bags packed. Not heading to Ridge House, but nearby. I'd rented a small Airbnb cabin on the opposite side of the lake. Simple, 2-bedroom, screened porch, a view of the water just far enough that I could see the lights from Ridge House across the way, but not the faces. I didn't blast music on the drive. I didn't call anyone. I let the quiet do what it does when it's earned, not feared. When I pulled up to the cabin, it was just past noon. A handful of cars were already parked along the road, retreat guests. Some were walking toward the ridge dock, towels over shoulders, drinks in hand. As I unloaded my duffel, 2 of them passed by, chatting. Then one of them stopped mid-sentence, nudging the other. "That's Venus, right? I thought she wasn't invited." I smiled, the first one that felt real in a long time. "No one invites a storm," I said, not looking back. "It just arrives." They said my name in a whisper. I answered with volume. That Saturday morning, the streets around Lake Granby were buzzing. People in sandals and wide-brim hats shuffled through the local market, balancing paper bags of apples, jars of honey, and overpriced soaps wrapped in twine. I'd walked that market before, years ago, but this time, I wasn't invisible. I passed a booth selling framed lake photographs when I heard someone say my name. "Venus?" I turned. It was Clara, my cousin's wife. Behind her stood Daniel, one of the new Ridge partners Dad had brought in years ago. Their expressions flickered between recognition and discomfort. "Didn't expect to see you here," Clara said, a tight smile forced onto her face. I didn't flinch. "That makes 2 of us. They didn't ask why I was in town. They didn't invite me to join them." Clara gave a little nod and turned away, already halfway down the path before Daniel caught up with her. As I watched their backs fade into the crowd, I realized something. I no longer needed permission to exist in a place that used to belong to all of us. That afternoon, the retreat's legacy presentation was set to take place. I knew because it had been listed in the online press kit. A glossy, curated agenda of family-centric speeches, art unveilings, and Ridge reflections. It was the sort of thing Dad always loved, public affirmation dressed up as sentimentality. I parked near the side road that led up to Ridge House. I didn't wear anything flashy. Jeans, Neutral blouse, hair tied back. Nothing that could be spun as dramatic or hostile. As I approached the back of the crowd, Lorraine's voice echoed through the microphone. She stood confidently on a small wooden platform beneath a white canopy, flanked by two banners. One with the Ridge Tree crest, my tree crest, and another with the slogan, Legacy, Loyalty, Love. Lorraine smiled, perfect and poised. "We're here today to honor our shared history," she said. "The vision that started with our grandparents, carried by our parents, and shaped now by us, together." I waited. Not because I was nervous. I waited because timing matters. She gestured toward a large mural, just unveiled behind her. My logo again, painted across a paneled wall. Modified, yes, but unmistakably mine. The same curvature, the same color palette, the same brushstroke weight I'd used when I first sketched it in graphite. And then I stepped forward. "You forgot to credit the artist." Her back stiffened before she turned. Murmurs scattered through the audience. Gasps, then silence. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. I walked calmly toward the edge of the makeshift stage, lifted my tablet, and tapped the screen to reveal a folder. Signed artwork files, email threads, the video of Grandpa naming me as the one to carry the place forward, and, at the very top, a copy of the notarized will. I didn't raise my voice. Signed, dated, witnessed. Before he died, Grandpa made it clear who should hold this space. And what you see behind Lorraine? That's my design, my handwriting, my legacy, rewritten without my consent. Wendell started to move forward from the side, but I held his gaze and didn't budge. His shoulders hesitated, then stiffened. He stopped. Lorraine, still holding the mic, tried to recover. "This isn't the time or place," she said, her voice cracking for the first time. "It's the exact time," I answered. "You chose the stage. You chose the image. I'm just standing where I belong." A beat of silence followed. Then a child's voice broke it. "Is that the lady from the video you told us not to mention?" Everyone turned. It was Tommy, Lorraine's son. He stood near the front row, holding a cup of lemonade, looking up with innocent confusion. "She's in Grandpa's video, the one where he said she'd take care of the lake house." Laughter, soft, unsure, broke across the gathering like a ripple. Someone near the back pulled out a phone. I saw the red recording light blink. That was the moment the Ridge legacy cracked. Two cousins walked out. An aunt stared directly at Dad. Another guest whispered something, then followed behind. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just said, "If you want a legacy that matters, start by telling the full story." And then, without looking back, I walked away. By the time I reached my car, the crowd was buzzing with speculation. The whispers I'd once been afraid of were now out loud. As I placed my tablet on the passenger seat and reached for my keys, my phone vibrated. A voicemail. From Dad. I didn't press play right away. I stared at the screen, letting the moment settle. Then I sat in the driver's seat, turned the key to accessory mode, and let the air conditioning hum softly around me. His voice, muffled but clear, played over the speaker. "We need to talk, not about damage control, about what I got wrong." I didn't react, not yet, because something had shifted, and I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I didn't go back to the retreat. I didn't need to. The next morning, I let myself sleep in for the first time in weeks. The sun was already high by the time I opened the windows at the cabin. The lake shimmered just beyond the trees, and for a moment, I stood there barefoot, coffee in hand, breathing it all in. No sound of distant speeches, no forced laughter, no passive-aggressive small talk served over quiche. Just quiet. The good kind. There were no messages from Lorraine, not even a follow-up to the text I'd sent. Dad had called again, once, but didn't leave a voicemail this time. That silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. I wasn't surprised. A little after 10, there was a soft knock at the door. I knew who it was before I opened it. Jolene stood there, holding a glass pie dish wrapped in a towel. She looked exactly like the last time I saw her. Flawless, a little over-accessorized for a lakeside brunch, but still Jolene. "I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome," she said, voice cautious. I didn't fake a smile. Didn't say, "Of course." I just opened the door wider and said, "Come in. The people who show up late still showed up. That's more than most." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since pulling into the driveway. Inside, the table was already set. Nothing fancy. Folded napkins, a carafe of coffee, a half-warm frittata. Two cousins, Seth and Marcy, were already seated. They'd arrived quietly earlier that morning, no fanfare. Just a text. "Where's the cabin?" And a knock 20 minutes later. We didn't need music, or decorations, or speeches. We just sat and ate. Jolene placed the pie in the center and sat down slowly. For the first 15 minutes, we didn't talk about Ridge House or Lorraine or anything heavy. We talked about movies, about a raccoon Marcy swore had followed her to the car. We laughed. It was simple. Strange how rare that feels now. Eventually, Jolene glanced up at me, hands clasped in her lap. "I'm sorry," she said. I nodded once. Let the words sit there. "I took the contract," she continued, "because it was easy, because I thought you weren't in the picture. I figured if they weren't including you, maybe it was mutual." "They told you I stepped back," I said. "Not a question." She nodded. "They said you didn't want the responsibility, that you weren't stable enough to handle the pressure of a legacy event." I didn't answer right away. I poured myself another cup of coffee, let the heat of the mug settle in my palms. "You're not the only one," I said finally, "who signed something without reading the fine print." She blinked at that, then gave a small laugh. Not mocking, just knowing. The thing about betrayal isn't always the act, it's who watches it happen and doesn't flinch. Jolene had looked away once, but she'd looked back. That counted for something. After brunch, Marcy helped me wash dishes. Seth offered to sweep the deck. Jolene lingered near the edge of the porch, her arms crossed as she stared out toward the water. "I used to think being near them meant being in the family," she said quietly. "Now I think I just wanted to be close to the center of the story." I didn't offer her comfort. She wasn't asking for it. We both knew how it felt to be on the outside looking in. Only now, I was choosing that view. Only 3 people came to my version of the retreat. There were no press photos, no social media tags, no carefully curated speeches about heritage or vision. Just conversation, laughter, the clink of forks against ceramic. And when I showed them my original sketchbook, the early drafts of the Ridge Crest, the notes in Grandpa's handwriting, no one asked if it was a shared family creation. No one tried to explain it away. They just listened. That's what I'd been missing. Not approval, not applause. Just presence. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I just wanted someone to sit in the room and see me. A little after 2, I checked my email. Subject line: Ridge Legacy Feedback Survey. The automated message thanked me for attending this year's event and offered a 5-question form to evaluate the retreat experience. I stared at the email for a solid minute before laughing. Deep, genuine. I deleted it without reading the rest. Later that evening, after the last coffee cups were rinsed and everyone had packed up, I went to my bag and pulled out 2 padded envelopes. One addressed to a journalist I trusted, someone who once interviewed me about design ethics and branding. The other for my family's informal archivist, Aunt June, who ran a private website collecting Ridge history. I didn't write a dramatic cover letter. No ultimatum. Just a short line tucked into each envelope. If anyone ever wants the full story, this is where it lives. I wasn't rewriting their version. I was anchoring mine. As the sun began to set, painting the water in burnt gold, Jolene stayed behind a little longer. We sat on the steps in silence, sipping tea. She finally asked, "So, will you ever go back?" I didn't answer right away. I finished my cup, set it down beside me. "Not unless I'm coming to buy the place," I said, without a trace of humor. The drive back to Denver was quiet. No podcasts, no playlists, just the hum of the highway beneath my tires and the occasional highway sign pulling me forward. I didn't replay the retreat in my head. I didn't think about the mural or the faces that turned when I spoke, or even the voicemail from my father. I let it all sit in the back seat, like old luggage I had no intention of unpacking again. By the time I reached my apartment, the Sunday sun was dipping low, casting shadows across the floor. The place smelled faintly of dust and peppermint, the last candle I'd burned still lingering in the walls. I walked in slowly, set my bags down, and stood in the middle of my living room. Everything felt exactly as I'd left it. And yet, everything had changed. There were no flowers waiting, no messages of congratulations, no triumphant victory playlist, just my own quiet space, my shelves, my books, my sketchbooks lined up in a neat row, my name, uninterrupted, untouched. 2 days later, a letter arrived, certified mail. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with a logo I recognized in an instant, Ridge Legal Holdings. Inside, a formal notice. The Ridge property had been listed for sale. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but the paperwork said otherwise. The documents were dated a month ago, right around the time Lorraine had unveiled her legacy plan. My name didn't appear once. Apparently, I'd been removed from the ownership ledger last year. Quietly, no notification, no legal challenge, just erased. But I wasn't the same woman I'd been a year ago. I sent a single email to my lawyer, attached everything, again. The video, the will, the paperwork. Within 48 hours, the listing was pulled. I didn't have to threaten. I didn't have to beg. I just had to remind them I still existed. That small, undeniable fact was no longer negotiable. What followed wasn't dramatic. No family conference call. No apology dinner. Lorraine didn't reach out. And honestly, I didn't expect her to. Dad, however, did send an email. Just one line. I regret letting fear decide who deserved to belong. There was no greeting, no signature. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The man who once said I was too emotional to handle pressure had admitted something I never thought he would. I was never the problem. He was just afraid of what it meant to include someone who didn't follow his script. Later that week, one of my younger cousins posted a photo online. It was of us, years ago, sitting on the Ridge dock with sketchbooks in our laps. She'd tagged me for the first time in over 5 years. No caption full of hashtags, just 6 quiet words. The one who remembered the truth. That was the first time I cried. Not from pain, but from something that looked a lot like release. Of course, the scars remained. I still flinch when I hear the Ridge name in conversation. I still check the guest list twice before agreeing to any family event. I still can't bring myself to attend Thanksgiving. Not yet. But I've learned that some wounds aren't meant to be forgotten. They're meant to be remembered with care, so they don't reopen. And sometimes, the very thing that hurt you becomes the map for how you'll live going forward. 1 month after the retreat, I gave a talk at a local art school. The invitation came from a professor who'd read an article about legacy and branding. He didn't know the full story, didn't need to. He asked if I'd speak on creative integrity, especially in complicated environments. I stood in front of 30 students, most of them still trying to figure out what kind of artist they wanted to be. I told them about ownership, not just legal, but emotional, the kind that no one else has the right to edit. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. Afterward, a student, young, curly-haired, probably no older than 20, raised her hand and asked gently, "How did you forgive them?" I paused. Then I answered honestly. I didn't. I just stopped waiting for them to change. That answer sat in the room like something sacred. Nobody clapped. But I saw nods. Quiet, slow. The kind that comes from lived experience. Later that week, I passed a storefront near Union Station. A new tourist shop had opened up, selling branded mugs and t-shirts with Granby Strong printed across the front. One shirt caught my eye. It said, "Legacy is earned, not inherited." I smiled. Not a dramatic smile, not a triumphant grin. Just soft. Real. Because some inheritances don't come in deeds or bank accounts. Some walk beside you until you stop asking for them and start becoming them.
Hello, my name is Stella. My sister stormed in with scissors and hacked my hair off while I screamed, and my mother held me still, not to stop her, but to help her. Let her vent, she said. Our angel needs to release. And my father? He didn't flinch. Just hair, he barked from the other room. You're lucky. But what came after was worse. They didn't stop at my hair. They stole my scholarship, my future, my name from family photos. So I took pictures. I kept records. I stayed quiet until now. Why did they work so hard to erase me? And what happens when the one you erased decides to rewrite the ending? I had just finished laying out my navy blouse and tan slacks for the interview. The scholarship committee had been clear. Business casual, portfolio in hand, hair neat and professional. I took my time brushing through my long dark hair, smoothing every strand. It was the one part of myself I never questioned. My reflection in the bathroom mirror finally felt steady. For a moment, I believed I might actually belong in a room of people who made decisions about futures. I didn't hear her come in. The door slammed behind Callista like a trap snapping shut. Her footsteps weren't angry, they were purposeful, like she had been rehearsing this. She didn't say a word at first, just stood behind me, breathing heavy. I turned around slowly, my brush still in hand. "What's your problem?" I asked. I kept my voice level. Her eyes were wild, rimmed red like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. She clenched something in her hand. I didn't see it clearly until the silver caught the light. "Scissors." "Don't," I said, not screamed, not begged, just one word, soft but clear. She lunged. Before I could raise an arm or even move, she grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked. I screamed, not because it hurt, not at first, but because I knew what she was about to do. She shoved me forward, slammed my hip into the bathroom counter. With her free hand, she began hacking. Snip, snip, rip. Chunks of my hair fell like feathers. Some clung to my shirt, some floated into the sink. She cut without rhythm or reason, just furious motion, as if my hair were the reason her world wasn't working. I tried to fight back, grabbed her wrist, elbowed her ribs, but she was stronger, and worse, she didn't care what damage she caused. Then came my mother. "Callista!" I cried out. "Stop! Mom! She's—" But Isolde didn't grab her. She didn't scream at her. She grabbed me. "Don't move," my mother said, not coldly, not harsh, like it was an act of mercy. "Let her vent. Our angel needs to release all that tension. You know how emotional she's been." I struggled, but her grip tightened. She actually smiled, like we were all just playing out a scene in a family comedy. "Stop! Please, Mom! She's cutting my hair!" I begged. Garrison's voice echoed from the living room. "What's going on now?" "She's fine," my mother called back. "Just a little hair." Then his voice, dismissive, irritated. "Just hair? She's lucky." I stopped fighting, because that's the moment I realized they were never going to stop her. Callista let the scissors clatter to the floor when she was done. I looked like a chewed-up rag doll. She huffed once, looked me up and down, and walked out like she'd just completed a chore. My mother let me go, patted my arm, and said, "You'll feel better once it settles in. Maybe now you won't be so tense all the time." I locked myself in the bathroom and didn't come out for hours. I didn't cry. Crying was what they wanted. They wanted me to fall apart so they could say I was too sensitive, dramatic, difficult. Instead, I picked up the scissors, the clumps of hair, and laid them on the counter. I turned on the harsh white lights above the mirror and took photos. The jagged cuts along the back of my head, the red lines on my scalp where she had pulled too hard, my blank expression staring back at me. Every angle, every wound, every piece of proof. The next morning, I stood in front of the university's administration building with my folder in hand. I'd pulled my hacked hair into the neatest bun I could manage, but it still looked uneven, frayed, like I'd been through something I couldn't name. The woman behind the desk glanced up. She smiled, but I saw her eyes pause, longer than polite, on my head. "You're here for the scholarship interview?" she asked. "Yes." I sat in a conference room for 10 minutes. 3 men and 1 woman entered. None of them smiled. They asked about my GPA, my goals, my volunteer work. I answered as best I could, my voice steady, but I saw their glances, first at me, then at each other. By the end of the interview, the woman said, "Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch." They didn't ask for my portfolio. When I stepped outside, the wind caught my hair, or what was left of it, and it whipped into my eyes. I didn't fix it. I just stood there for a moment, breathing in the air that didn't care what happened inside my house. I walked home slowly. That evening, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. The pictures were still on my phone. I didn't delete them. I didn't send them. I didn't tell anyone. Because somewhere deep inside me, a voice I hadn't listened to in years spoke up. They were never going to protect you. They were never going to save you. So I would have to do it myself. The morning after my decision not to remain silent passed in a fog. I barely noticed the sun move across the blinds or the shadows shifting on my walls. The air in the house was heavy, not with anger, but with something worse: avoidance. Nobody came to my room, no knocking, no checking, no questions. I didn't leave the house, didn't open my phone. It buzzed now and then, maybe a classmate, maybe a reminder about an assignment, maybe someone from the scholarship board following up. But I let it ring and die in silence. It wasn't just what happened with the scissors. It was the way no one treated it as a thing that happened, like the hair just fell off by accident, like my scalp hadn't been pulled, like I wasn't bleeding underneath where no one looked. Around midday, I walked into the kitchen, hoping to grab a coffee. Isolde stood at the sink, rinsing dishes. I paused, my feet sticking to the tile like they had roots. "Why did you hold me down?" I asked. I didn't raise my voice, just said it straight, like someone asking about a missing sock. She didn't look up, just kept rinsing. "Because you were going to make it worse," she replied flatly. Worse. She said it like I was the one swinging scissors. Like defending myself from a full-grown woman slicing into my head was escalation. I didn't respond, didn't yell. I poured the coffee, hands steady, heart slower than usual. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like pleading, and I'd retired from begging in this house. That afternoon, while cleaning out the bottom drawer of my closet, I found the journal I'd kept in high school, torn corners, spiral binding bent in 3 places. Pages filled with the kind of handwriting only a teenager could think looked elegant. I flipped to an entry from my 16th birthday. "I thought the cake would have my name on it," I'd written, just once, but it said "Happy Birthday, Callista." Again. Another page, my high school graduation. Mom asked me to take the family picture. I said okay, but later when I looked through the photos on her phone, I realized I wasn't in a single one. I turned more pages. One for Christmas when I made homemade ornaments for everyone. Callista broke half of them, threw the rest in the fireplace. Mom just smiled and said, "She's just stressed." I'd been collecting offenses like a scrapbook, pretending it was memory keeping. Reading it now, I wasn't sad. I was stunned. It had all been there, plain as day. Not just this week, not just this year, always. It was about 6 p.m. when I heard my name called from the living room. Not gently, not angrily. Just summoned, like a child being reminded where she belonged. I walked in. Garrison was on the recliner, remote in hand, but the TV off. Isolde sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Callista stood near the fireplace, arms crossed like she'd been waiting to be applauded. I stood just inside the doorway. "We'd like to move past what happened," Isolde said. No apology, no acknowledgement. Garrison nodded. "And that starts with accountability." My eyebrows raised slightly. "From who?" Isolde blinked slowly. "You need to apologize to your sister." I almost laughed. "She attacked me." "She had a moment," Garrison cut in. "Don't be dramatic." You've always been good at spinning things. Spinning things? I repeated. You think I imagined being held down? She's under a lot of pressure, Isolde added, almost gently. You're both adults, but Callista's business has had a tough quarter. Things have been stressful. Callista didn't say a word, just looked at me like a judge waiting for the defendant to admit guilt. And that gives her permission to cut my hair while you pinned me like a dog? Garrison leaned forward. You've always made everything so heavy, Stella. We need peace in this house. If you want to stay under this roof, you need to stop fueling conflict. I turned to my sister. She smirked, triumphant. She'd already won. All I had left to give was the line they were starving for. I'm sorry, I said, not quietly, not loudly, just enough for the room to hear. There, Isolde said. That wasn't so hard. Callista rolled her eyes and left the room. I stood there for a beat longer, feeling nothing, not even humiliation, just numbness, like standing in water that's gone still. Later that night, I sat on the floor of my bedroom. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that used to comfort me when I was younger, when it meant everyone was asleep and I could read or write or breathe without interruption. Now it felt like a wall of insulation, like nothing could get in, but nothing could get out either. I pulled my journal closer and wrote one line. They will never protect me. I am disposable here, but I won't be forever. I don't remember falling asleep. But I do remember waking up at 3:47 a.m. and staring at the ceiling with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. This wouldn't end with me crying in corners, or apologizing for getting hurt, or asking why the people who were supposed to love me only knew how to manage me. A shift happened. Not a roar, not a dramatic vow, just a switch. Like I stopped being afraid of being alone and started being afraid of staying here. Next time she lifts a hand, I'll be ready. That same night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house settled into its usual mechanical hush, I lay awake listening to the heater hum through the vents. I couldn't sleep, not from fear, not even from anger, but from a pulsing clarity I hadn't felt in years. If she raised her hand again, I wouldn't flinch. I would respond. Differently this time. The next morning, I skipped breakfast. The air downstairs was too tight, too careful. I heard dishes clink, Callista's fake laugh drifting from the hallway. I stayed upstairs, pacing, until the light shifted across the floor. Sometime in the late afternoon, I decided to do something small, something that felt like mine. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my dresser, one I hadn't opened in years, and found it exactly where I left it. My grandmother's scarf, faded blue with little stitches along the edge where she had taught me to sew. Inside it, like it always had been, was my old wooden hairbrush, the one she used when I was a girl, the one she always called your crown's keeper. I held it in both hands, sat on the edge of the bed, and let my mind wander. In my memory, her hands were warm, gentle but sure. She never tugged, never rushed. She'd hum old songs while brushing through my hair, saying things like, "This hair is yours and no one else's," or, "Don't ever let anyone tell you how to wear it. You wear it how you feel." It wasn't just brushing. It was care. It was belonging. I closed my eyes, held the brush against my chest, and for a moment, I let myself believe she was still in the room, watching, witnessing. That feeling didn't last long. Later that evening, after the sky had turned dark and the house quieted again, I realized I needed groceries. I hadn't left the house since the attack. I pulled on a hoodie, tucked my uneven hair under a baseball cap, and walked to the corner store about 6 blocks down. It was familiar, unremarkable, but even familiar places start to feel foreign when you don't feel safe in your own skin. As I reached the frozen section, I caught the tail end of a whisper. "Isn't that the girl? The one with the breakdown?" I turned slightly, pretending to scan the labels on a bag of peas, while my heart sped up. 2 women stood near the dairy case, pretending to not look at me. But their eyes told a different story. I blinked, pulled out my phone. Something felt off. As I walked toward checkout, I opened Instagram and searched Callista's profile. Her latest post featured a series of selfies, her hair freshly styled in soft waves, face bare, holding scissors. Caption: Big chop for mental clarity. Sometimes the hair holds the pain. Hat healing # raw beauty. The next post was worse. A shot of the bathroom floor, strands of dark hair scattered like fallen leaves. Caption: Some of us cut to grow. She had posted the aftermath. My aftermath. But it wasn't a confession, it was a narrative. One where she was the main character, bravely shedding the weight of the past. The likes were in the hundreds. Comments praising her bravery, her vulnerability. I walked home without remembering how I crossed streets or passed familiar houses. The words on the screen had settled like a cold weight inside my stomach. She hadn't just hurt me, she had made me into content, into a story that suited her. Back in my room, I shut the door, sat at my desk, and began screenshotting everything. Her posts, the captions, the comments. Especially the ones that said, "So proud of you," and "You're such an inspiration." I created a folder on my desktop and named it Her Lies. Not for revenge, for record, because if she was going to tell stories, so was I. But mine would be documented. I opened the mirror on my vanity. For the first time in over a week, I really looked at myself. The uneven hair, the small scab where she'd nicked me, the quiet sadness in my eyes. But there was something else there now. A stillness. Not the kind that waits, but the kind that watches. The kind that prepares. I picked up my phone and opened an old email account I hadn't used in years. The one I kept private, the one tied to nothing and no one in my family. I labeled a folder Proof and started uploading files. Photo of my hair post incident, screenshot of the post, screenshots of comments, voice memo to myself, detailing the event. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I needed them. Needed to hold on to the truth before it got swept away by her performance. On a whim, I reached for my college journal, buried under a pile of books in the back of my closet. Flipping through the pages, I landed on a line I'd copied from a professor once. If your voice shakes, write until it doesn't. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I wrote, page after page, not for therapy, not for peace, for clarity. I chronicled every incident, every passive-aggressive comment, every moment someone told me to shrink while she was allowed to expand. I wrote like someone assembling a case, not to prosecute, but to remember. Because when they gaslight you long enough, you begin to forget what actually happened, and I was done forgetting. My grandmother once told me, people will try to rewrite you. Keep a pen in your hand. I finally understood what she meant. If Callista was going to paint herself as the phoenix, I'd show the ashes she left behind. She had turned me into a punchline, but I wasn't going to let her be the only one telling the story. And it didn't take long before the universe handed me something I hadn't expected. Proof. It was late, just past midnight. I'd gone downstairs to refill my water bottle, careful not to make noise. The hallway was dimly lit, and the kitchen door was slightly open. I heard Callista's voice before I saw her. She was on speakerphone, pacing slowly in the kitchen. I paused near the hallway corner, hidden in the shadows. Something about the sharpness in her tone made me freeze. She thinks the haircut was the worst part, Callista said, then laughed, short, cold. I've wanted to ruin her face for years. That stupid look she gives, like she's better than us. My blood ran cold. She paused for a moment, probably to sip her drink before continuing. Mom and Dad will cover for me. They always do. They don't care what I do to her. That was it. That was the moment. My hand slipped quietly into the pocket of my hoodie, fingers trembling slightly as I opened the voice recorder app. I pressed the button, held my breath. She kept talking, careless, unfiltered. She laughed again. You should have seen her face when I chopped it. I mean, come on, she's so dramatic, always has been. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I got what I needed. I backed away slowly, walked upstairs without making a sound, and closed my door behind me, locked it. My legs gave out a little, so I sat on the floor, back pressed to the wall. I played it back. She thinks the haircut was the worst part. Every word burned. But it also built something inside me. A clarity. I hadn't imagined the malice. It wasn't heat-of-the-moment rage. She had planned it, wanted it, knew it would hurt me, and wanted it to. And now, it wasn't just my word. I had the recording. I renamed the file. Root. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just listened to it on repeat until the sound no longer made me flinch, just made me sharper. I was no longer reacting. I was collecting. The next morning, the kitchen was quiet again. Callista had gone out, probably for another one of her healing brunches. My mother was making coffee. She didn't look at me when I walked in. "Mom," I said calmly. She turned slightly. "If you found out Callista meant to do it, not a moment of anger, but really meant to, what would you say?" She didn't pause, didn't blink. "I'd say you probably provoked her. You always know how to get under people's skin." That was it. All the oxygen left the room, and I saw her for what she was, not just complicit, convinced. This wasn't confusion. This was conviction. Her version of me had replaced the real thing a long time ago. I looked her in the eye and said, "If it happens again, I'm not coming to you. I'm going beyond you." She froze, coffee pot in one hand, her posture still. But her face, that subtle shift in her eyes, told me everything. She knew what I meant, and for the first time, she looked unsure. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked upstairs. That afternoon, I made tea, pulled out my laptop, and started digging. State assault laws. How much force constituted a misdemeanor? What kinds of incidents were considered domestic violence between siblings? Whether or not voice recordings were admissible in court in California, the answer was yes. If one party knew it was being recorded, I printed everything. Then I looked into guardianship rules. Turns out, since I was technically still tied to my mother's name on certain legal documents, including financial aid paperwork, there were angles, fraud, negligence, possibly more, if I could prove malicious enabling. Next, I researched online harassment, not just in terms of cyberbullying, but defamation. If someone used your image or misrepresented a personal event for public clout, there were paths, not easy, not guaranteed, but paths. I made a binder, labeled it June. It was still February, but I wanted a deadline, something that reminded me this wasn't endless. Each night after that, while the rest of the house watched Netflix or scrolled Instagram, I was compiling, sorting, building a case. It was the first time in my life I felt like I was steering the story. I still spoke to no one. I didn't confront Callista. I didn't argue with my mother. I didn't waste time trying to fix anyone's opinion of me. I let them continue thinking I was folding, while I sharpened. A week later, I opened a new email account under a pseudonym. I sent the voice recording and documentation to myself, saved it in the cloud, and backed it up on a USB drive I tucked into the lining of my old purse, just in case. If someone had walked into my room that night, they wouldn't have seen rage or panic. They would have seen order, stacks of printed articles, highlighted passages, notes scribbled in margins. That's what survival started to look like. One night, as I organized the last of the folders, I whispered aloud, "This time if she hurts me, it won't just be my word against hers. It'll be a matter of law." I wasn't waiting to be rescued anymore. By the following week, my binder was full. I had printed every screenshot of Callista's posts, every smug caption, every shallow comment praising her for her courageous haircut. I had screen-grabbed the photos from my phone, the close-up of my scalp where she'd yanked so hard it bled, and I kept that audio file like it was gold. I backed everything up in 3 places: a password-protected drive on my laptop, a cloud folder under a pseudonym, and a physical USB I slipped into the lining of my old pencil case. Then I emailed it all to one person I knew wouldn't ask too many questions, Professor Hardy, my ethics instructor from college. Subject, in case something happens, no message body. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. By then, I wasn't collecting evidence to prove I was innocent. I was protecting the version of me that wouldn't let them rewrite me. Again. I wasn't planning a press conference. I was building insurance. That Sunday morning, I came down to the kitchen for breakfast. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. The smell of burnt toast lingered, and I knew Callista had already come and gone. Isolde was at the table reading the newspaper, pretending not to notice me. I poured myself a glass of orange juice and sat across from her. A minute passed. Then another. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. Then Callista walked in, phone in hand, scrolling like she hadn't ruined anything. I didn't look up. Not at first. Only after Callista sat down beside our mother did I finally break the silence. "If it happens again," I said quietly, "I won't come to Mom. I'll go to the police." Neither of them moved for a second. Callista scoffed, but it sounded forced. She didn't look up from her phone. Isolde's eyes flicked over her reading glasses and locked on me. "You don't need to threaten your sister." "It's not a threat," I replied. "It's a boundary." Another silence followed, thicker than the last. Callista got up and walked out of the room. Isolde just stared like she didn't recognize me. I let the quiet settle between us, then stood and rinsed my glass. I didn't storm out or slam anything. I simply returned upstairs, closed my door, and sat on the bed. A few minutes later, there was a knock. I didn't answer, but the door opened anyway. Isolde stepped in, arms crossed, her lips thin. "Why would you say something like that in front of her?" she asked. "Are you trying to make things worse than they already are?" I turned to her slowly. "I said it because you weren't going to." "She's your sister." "No," I said. "She's your daughter, and so am I. But you treat us like we play different roles in some drama you wrote." She blinked. I kept going. "I've spent years trying not to upset the balance. You know what I've realized? The balance is broken. And it always has been." "You're exaggerating." "No, I'm remembering, and you can't control that." Isolde opened her mouth to reply, then thought better of it. She didn't shout, didn't slam the door, just turned and left, slowly. It was the quietest retreat I'd ever seen from her, and the most honest. That night, I pulled out my laptop and drafted an email to the university's financial aid office. I told the truth, that I had been assaulted by a family member, that the trauma had disrupted my academic performance, that it had involved people with legal authority over parts of my file. I included attachments, screenshots, photos, the transcript of the audio file. I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I left the cursor hovering over the send button and sat back in my chair. It wasn't a letter begging for help. It was a record, a notice, a reminder to myself that if they pushed again, I would push back, with everything I had. I closed the lid and turned off the light. Next time they swing, I'll strike back with the law. The email came just after lunch. I was sitting on the back porch with a mug of stale coffee, watching a squirrel try to outsmart the bird feeder, when my phone buzzed. A new message from the university's financial services department. Subject: Scholarship Disbursement. Confirmation. I opened it without thinking, expecting some follow-up form, maybe a thank you note. What I saw instead made my stomach clench. Your scholarship disbursement has been successfully processed and applied to the account ending in 0342. That wasn't my account. I stared at the number, reading it 3 times to be sure I wasn't mistaken. My own account ended in 9911. I'd memorized it, set up direct deposit myself months ago, triple-checked it on every form. I dialed the number listed at the bottom of the message. A woman answered after 3 rings, polite and chirpy, until I gave her my name and told her what was wrong. Let me check that for you. Just one moment. The hold music kicked in, light piano with too much echo. When she returned, her voice had changed. More careful. It looks like the disbursement was redirected to an alternate account at the request of the guardian listed on file. We have a signature dated from last week authorizing the change. I didn't even hear the rest. My hands felt cold, my face hot. Somehow, I managed to thank her and end the call. Then I sat there, coffee forgotten, heart pounding, trying to hold back the nausea climbing up my throat. I knew exactly what had happened. I didn't rush home. I walked slowly, deliberately. If I had burst through the door screaming, they would have written it off as another outburst. Instead,
I waited until dinner, when we were all seated like a portrait of forced civility. I set my phone face up on the table and said evenly, "Why is my scholarship money in a different account?" Isolde didn't look up. Garrison paused mid-cut of his steak.
Callista froze, fork halfway to her mouth. "Mom?" I pressed. She set her knife down, folded her napkin, and met my eyes without a hint of remorse. "We needed it." The room went silent. She added, "Callista's business has been struggling. She's at a turning point, and this money gave her the opportunity to reset. You can always apply for more." I stared at her, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. That was my tuition, my rent, my future. "It's just money," Garrison said, wiping his mouth. "You've always had a way of making things bigger than they are." Callista chimed in, casually. "It's not like it was going to change your life that much." I stood slowly. "You stole from me," Isolde scoffed. "Don't be dramatic." My voice didn't rise. "You committed fraud, Mom. You signed legal documents, redirected funds not meant for you." Garrison's chair scraped the floor as he stood. "That's enough." "I'm not finished." "Yes, you are," he said, his tone sharp now. "You've always stirred things up in this house. You come back here, act like we're the villains, and expect what? Applause?" I didn't answer. "You want to make this into something criminal? You go right ahead. But don't expect to live under this roof while you do it." Callista stood now, too, arms folded, leaning against the doorway like she was watching a soap opera. "You're not a victim, Stella. You're just bitter. Because people don't revolve around you." I didn't respond, not with words. I walked out of the dining room, up to my room, and started packing. I didn't take everything, just what I needed. My laptop, my files, my journal, the USB with all my documentation, a week's worth of clothes, a few books. They didn't follow me. When I came back downstairs with my bag, Garrison was back in his seat, cutting meat like nothing had happened. Isolde was on her phone. Callista smirked when I passed. At the front door, I paused. "You didn't just take money," I said. "You took the last bit of belief I had in this family, and that's something you can't pay back." Then I walked out. I spent the night at Leah's place, an old classmate turned part-time friend. She didn't ask questions when I showed up with a backpack and tired eyes, just handed me a blanket and told me to take the couch. The next morning, I opened my laptop and got to work. I drafted a full report, detailing the unauthorized withdrawal, the forged signature, the misuse of guardianship. I included screenshots, bank notices, a PDF of the email from the financial department. I attached the voice recording of Callista bragging about how Mom and Dad would cover for her, and labeled every file. When I was done, I took a breath. This wasn't just a complaint, it was a case. I reviewed the university's grievance policy, printed their code of conduct, and highlighted every violation. I wrote an affidavit, simple, direct, irrefutable, no begging, no emotional appeals, just the facts. When I finally hit send, it wasn't a cry for help. It was a declaration. They took everything from me. Now I'll take back what's mine, piece by piece. It had been nearly 4 weeks since I walked out of my parents' house. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a routine that wasn't glamorous, but was mine. I spent my days working part-time at a library near campus and my nights organizing documents for the case. I didn't miss the tension, the silence, or the performative dinners. But what I didn't expect was how deep the loss of my grandmother's necklace would cut. One morning, while sipping coffee in Leah's kitchen and scrolling through social media, I stopped cold. There it was. Callista, standing in front of a boutique, holding a bouquet of roses, her hand resting just below her collarbone. Around her neck hung the thin gold chain with the blue enamel pendant, Grandma's necklace, the same one she had promised to give me. The same one I had stored in a locked box with a note inside, written in Grandma's handwriting. For Stella, my heart. I remembered that note like scripture. I had opened that box maybe 3 times since she passed, always gently, always privately, and now it was being worn like a fashion statement for likes and comments. I called my mother that afternoon, not to scream, not to beg, just to confirm what I already knew. "Did you give Callista Grandma's necklace?" There was a pause on the line.
Then Isolde said, "You left it behind." "I left it in a locked box." She exhaled audibly, the kind of breath she used when trying to make herself sound exhausted by my questions. "We thought Callista would appreciate it more. She's going through so much." I wanted to scream, but what good would it do? She wasn't just taking things from me anymore. She was redistributing what wasn't hers, rationalizing it with the same tired excuse. Callista needs it more. Callista deserves it more. And me. And I was just the one who kept finding out too late. Later that week, I was tagged in a group photo from a charity gala organized by one of our distant cousins. I hadn't been invited, not that I would have gone. But as I clicked through the photos, a tightness formed in my chest. Everyone was there. Every cousin, every aunt, uncle, sibling. Callista stood in the center like she was the family's crown jewel. In one image, I was there, but barely. It was an older photo, repurposed for the event slideshow, showing a holiday gathering from 3 years ago. But in the frame, my face had been blurred, intentionally. And over the blur, someone had added a caption. "We grow stronger by leaving pain behind." I stared at the screen, breath caught in my throat. This wasn't carelessness. This was deliberate, a quiet campaign to make me disappear, not just from the house, but from memory. I walked to the store the next day, needing to pick up printer ink and clear my head. As I stood in line, the woman behind me leaned in a little too close and said, "It must be hard when a family turns on you like that." I turned slowly. I didn't recognize her. She wore a church volunteer badge and a kind smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me?" I said. She tilted her head. "Oh, I'm sorry. I just heard you've had a rough time lately. Families can be difficult, especially when they feel like they can't trust you." I didn't answer. I paid for my ink and walked out into the afternoon sun, breathing heavily. It wasn't just that I was being left out. I was being reframed, rewritten. The story going around town wasn't that Callista had cut my hair and our parents stole my scholarship. It was that I was unstable, dramatic, a burden they had finally been forced to let go of. I opened my phone on the sidewalk and started scrolling again through the recent family posts. Quotes like, "Some storms clear the way," and "You can't heal where you're hurt," were attached to photos of Callista smiling beside Isolde. She was stepping into my space, my place in the family, my role in the narrative, and no one was stopping her. That evening, I sat down at my laptop. I opened the email chain with my attorney and added a new message. Attached was the screenshot of Callista wearing the necklace. Another image of the charity slideshow, with my blurred face. I recorded a short voice memo and uploaded it. In it, I said, "They're not just ignoring me, they're documenting the erasure. Every caption, every edit, every retelling. I'm keeping score." I hit send. Then I opened a new social media account under my own name. I didn't follow anyone. I didn't post selfies or quotes. I uploaded 4 things. A photo of the necklace next to Grandma's handwritten note. A copy of the scholarship award email. A screenshot of the financial department's confirmation that the money went to an unauthorized account. A 30-second audio clip of Callista's brag about ruining her face. I didn't write a caption. I didn't need to. By morning, it had 100 shares. The messages started slowly. Old classmates, a neighbor from down the street, even a former babysitter. "I had no idea. I always wondered why you disappeared. I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner." I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't need sympathy. I needed clarity. Let them whisper. Let them scroll. Let them finally see. They think they're writing history. I'm preparing the correction. After the screenshots spread, it was only a matter of time. By the next Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a call from my lawyer, Anna Brooks. Her voice, calm and measured, cut through the whirlwind in my head like a rope tossed to someone in deep water. "Are you ready?" she asked. I said yes. I don't know if it was the truth, but it was the only answer left. The next day, I walked into her office in downtown Bakersfield. Not the courthouse, yet. Just her office, a converted bungalow near a park, quiet and unassuming. She handed me the civil suit documents, pages and pages, but every word mattered. My name, Callista's name.
Isolda's. Charges included fraudulent misappropriation of educational funds, civil assault, and willful emotional distress. We included the voice recordings, screenshots of the necklace, the photos from the gala where my face had been blurred out with poetic captions, the bank transfers, every detail we could legally back. Anna looked me square in the eye. This isn't just about holding them accountable. This is about setting precedent, emotionally, legally. You okay with what that means? I'm more than okay, I said. I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. Filing the suit felt less like revenge and more like returning something to its rightful place. The courthouse hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later. It wasn't a dramatic trial. No jury, no reporters camped outside. But it didn't have to be loud to be real. I didn't dress to impress. I wore navy pants and a simple blouse. My hair, still uneven in places, was tucked into a clean ponytail. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't want to hide. Callista showed up late, in full glam. Isolde came in quietly and took a seat in the back. Garrison wasn't there. When the judge read the list of grievances, I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't even look at them. I looked at the judge, at the documents, at Anna. Let the facts speak. 3 days later, while I was shelving books at the library, a local blog published the story. Nothing flashy, just a concise headline. Scholarship stolen, sister silenced, a family legal drama hits Bakersfield. I didn't even know it had run until someone left a printed copy in the break room with a sticky note that read, "Is this you?" By evening, it had made its way to a local news site. Then another, small waves at first, but enough to stir the still water my family had been hiding in. That weekend, I got a call from an old neighbor, Mrs. Lane. I let it go to voicemail. Her message said, "I saw the article, honey, and I believe you. I always did." I played it twice, just to hear those last words again. Isolde refused to comment to the news outlets. Callista, of course, took another route. She posted a short video to her story, perfect lighting, curated sadness in her eyes. Caption, "Real queens don't explain, they elevate." The comments? Brutal. Elevate after stealing your sister's tuition? You cut her hair and stole her money and you're calling yourself a queen? Shame on your whole family. Callista limited comments within hours. Then she deleted the post. Then she locked her account. At church the following Sunday, I'm told the whispers started. The same women who used to compliment Isolde on her perfect daughters now asked quiet questions in the parking lot. By Tuesday, the church parenting committee graciously invited her to step down. I got an email from the university's ethics board. They had begun reviewing the fraudulent scholarship disbursement. Callista's boutique lost 2 sponsors. Brands that had once used her for empowered woman campaigns cut ties overnight. I didn't make a statement. I didn't post a video. I didn't throw a celebration. I stayed quiet, and for the first time, that quiet didn't feel like erasure. It felt like power. When the final ruling came in, I was at home with my laptop open and a mug of tea beside me. The judge's decision was clear. Callista was ordered to pay restitution equal to the full scholarship amount. Isolde was removed as a legal guardian over my records and accounts, permanently. I was awarded damages for emotional distress and loss of educational opportunity. But the part that stayed with me came at the end. The judge, after reading everything, looked up and said, "This wasn't a moment of madness. This was a pattern of silencing." That one sentence felt heavier than the rest of the ruling combined. Not because it hurt, but because someone outside of me finally said it out loud. They didn't lose their daughter. They lost their control. It took me 4 hours to drive from Bakersfield to Sacramento. 4 hours of silence, broken only by the occasional hum of the road beneath me and the static of an old country station that faded in and out. I didn't bring much with me. A suitcase, a few books, a new journal, and the box Grandma's necklace used to be in, still empty, but I couldn't throw it away. I found a small studio apartment on the east side of town, walking distance to a charter school where I'd just been hired to teach part-time. The place had squeaky floors and a leaky faucet, but the windows opened wide and let in the morning sun. It was mine, all of it, every dusty corner, every quiet moment. I started small, growing herbs on the window ledge, painting one wall in a soft green just because I liked how it looked in the afternoon light. I made my own coffee in the mornings, watered my plants before work, and spent my evenings in stillness, letting the peace settle in places that used to ache. I didn't post anything about my new life. No new chapter captions, no dramatic before and after photos. I wasn't interested in anyone else's validation anymore. Some mornings, I'd stand in front of the mirror and run my fingers through my hair. It had grown just past my jaw now, soft at the ends, no longer jagged. Sometimes I still winced when I caught a glimpse of myself from the side. Memories had a way of hiding in angles, but mostly, I just looked. One Thursday evening in late fall, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and the city turned gold, I checked my voicemail after work. It was a name I hadn't seen in years. "Hi, Stella. This is Ms. Caro. I was your literature teacher in junior year. I saw the news this week, the article online. I just wanted to say I always believed you. I didn't know how to help back then, and I'm sorry. But I believe you." I sat down on the edge of my bed and hit play again. I didn't cry, but I listened twice. It didn't undo anything, didn't fix the years of being silenced or brushed aside, but it gave shape to something I hadn't realized I needed. Acknowledgement from someone outside the family, someone who saw me, even when I was invisible. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my new address. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Callista's. Neat. Controlled. I opened it slowly, not sure what I expected. Maybe more accusations, maybe a performance in prose. Instead, it read, "Stella, we were both victims of how we were raised. I forgive you. I hope you can do the same. Callista." No apology. No admission, just a neat redirection. She didn't say what she did. She didn't own it, but she forgave me, as if I'd wronged her. A day after the letter came, my phone rang. It was Isolde. I watched the screen blink with her name for a full minute before sending it to voicemail. She didn't call again. Garrison never reached out. I wasn't surprised. I didn't reply to Callista's letter. I tucked it into a drawer and left it there. Not because I was waiting, but because I didn't want to throw it away until I was sure I didn't need it. One quiet Sunday, after a long walk along the river, I sat at my desk with a cup of tea and opened my journal. I hadn't written in a while. Life had been steady, even good, but part of me had been afraid to reflect. Afraid that if I put it all into words, I might reopen something that had finally started to scab. But I wrote anyway. They will tell their version of events, and maybe some will believe it. That's not my concern anymore. I'm not here to fix the narrative. I'm here to build my life. I paused, sipped my tea, then continued. The scars didn't disappear, but they did clarify the boundaries, where I end and where they no longer get to begin. I wasn't healed. Healing is not a clean process. It doesn't announce its arrival. It sneaks in through quiet nights and steady routines, through saying no, through not answering the phone. But I was free. Not because someone pulled me out, not because someone came to my rescue, because I chose to walk away and not look back. I wasn't saved. I chose to survive, and that's enough. Sometimes, the ones who are supposed to love you most are the ones who hurt you in ways no stranger ever could. But silence isn't strength when it's used to bury the truth. What would you do if your own family tried to erase you? If this story moved you or reminded you of something you've lived through, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that uncover the quiet battles people fight every day.
Hi, I'm Patricia. And 2 weeks ago, at my parents' anniversary gala, my sister stood across a ballroom, looked me dead in the eye, and called me fat. Not by accident, not in private, but loud enough for the string quartet to flinch. She smiled while doing it. The room laughed. And I swallowed it, like I always had. But what no one knew was that the ballroom, the flowers, the very stage she stood on, I paid for all of it. So, when they handed her the mic and the world clapped for her speech, I took mine back, Want to know what happened when I told the truth in front of everyone? And she couldn't interrupt me this time? I should have known something was off the moment I opened that envelope. It wasn't the cream-colored cardstock or the ornate gold lettering that caught me. It was the line printed under attendee name, +1 to Malis Ford. That was it. No Patricia Langley, no youngest daughter, no real acknowledgement that I was anything more than an afterthought. I sat with the envelope in my lap, staring at it like it might rearrange itself if I waited long enough. Milese had mentioned the anniversary gala a few weeks prior. "You should come," she'd said over the phone. "You know how Mom gets about appearances." But she never said I was invited under her name. A +1? For my own parents' 75th anniversary? Still, I knew if I didn't show up, the gossip would hit me harder than the invite ever did. "Patricia always distances herself," they'd say. "She never cared much for family." But I did. I cared enough to come back. I told myself this trip wasn't about being seen, it was about being present, for them. For Mom and Dad. Charleston hadn't changed much in the 5 years I'd been gone. Spanish moss still draped the oaks like a southern ghost story. The roads wound tight between antebellum homes, and the humidity clung to your neck like an unspoken grudge. I drove in with the windows up and the AC on high, trying not to overthink every street I turned onto. But it was hard to ignore the feeling creeping in with every passing mile. The further I got into the city, the more I felt like I was shrinking. I passed the old park where Callista and I used to play. She'd take the swings, I'd take the monkey bars. Even then, she liked the spotlight. I just wanted the quiet. It had been years since I'd thought of that place, and even longer since it had felt like it belonged to me too. The hotel stood downtown, stately as ever. Marble steps, grand archways, a doorman in a tux, and a smile too stiff to be real. Inside, the ballroom glowed under chandeliers that probably cost more than my car. Tables were already filling. Laughter echoed in high ceilings. Champagne glasses clinked like tiny reminders of who's who. No one greeted me. No one said, "We've been waiting for you." The front staff barely made eye contact as I approached the check-in table. I cleared my throat. "Patricia Langley." The young woman flipped through her clipboard, then paused. I don't see you listed under that name." She glanced at her colleague, then back at me. "Are you perhaps a guest of Ms. Malis Ford?" I didn't flinch. "Yes, that's me." A name tag was handed over, blank space where my title should have been. No daughter, no family, just the word guest in bold black print. I pinned it to my dress like a label I hadn't chosen. Callista spotted me from across the room. Her eyes widened theatrically as she made her way over, arms outstretched, like we hadn't been estranged by years of silence. "Oh my God, you made it!" she sang out, loud enough to gather attention. "I was just telling everyone how great it'd be if you actually showed." That word, "actually," landed like a slap with a smile. It was her specialty. Polite jabs wrapped in gold foil. People nearby nodded, amused, perhaps entertained. One woman sipped her wine and gave me a look I'd seen before, the kind that scans, judges, and stores away for later. "You look so comfortable," Callista added, eyeing my green linen dress with a tilt of her head. "Very you." I tightened my jaw, careful not to let the fire rise past my throat. I didn't come here to bite back, not yet. Let her keep her games. Let her think I was still playing by her rules. I offered a smile, small, unshaken, and moved to find my seat. I scanned the central table, the one set aside for immediate family. Name cards glinted under the light. Callista Langley, Isolde Langley, Charles Langley. Even Malis had a place. But mine wasn't there. I circled the table again, slower this time. No Patricia, no placeholder, not even a fold of paper left blank. Somewhere behind me, a waiter asked if I needed help. "No," I replied, though it felt more like a question than an answer. I stepped back, watching my sister sip from her glass as if nothing had happened, her smile fixed in place like a weapon disguised as warmth. In Charleston, they don't exile you with noise. They do it with silence and a smile. If clothes could speak, mine were whispering I didn't belong here. The green linen dress I had chosen, handmade, no label, worn because it breathed easy in spring air, looked out of place against the polished bodies wrapped in satin and sequins. It wasn't just the fabric. It was the unspoken rule. When you step into a ballroom like this, you don't come to be yourself. You come to be who they expect you to be. I made my way past the bar and out onto the garden terrace, where string lights blinked softly in the twilight. A trio of violins played something classical and forgettable. People stood in curated clusters, glasses in hand, posture precise. I could feel their glances as I passed. Not malicious, just cataloging, like I was a smudge on an otherwise flawless frame. I leaned against the railing, taking a slow breath. I wore comfort, I thought. They wore status. Milas appeared beside me, her presence familiar and always a little awkward. She nudged my elbow gently. "You okay?" I smiled, but not too wide. "Yeah, just taking it all in." She gave me a look that said she knew better, then turned toward the crowd. "You look good, though. Real." "Thanks," I said, even though it didn't land. Compliments here were often just well-dressed lies. A voice called out from inside. "Group photo for the family!" People shuffled toward the main hallway, where a backdrop with our family name in gold stood ready. Callista took center stage, naturally. She directed the photographer, like she was shooting for a magazine. Mom and Dad were flanked by Callista's children, Isolde smiling, as if nothing in the world had ever gone sideways. No one called my name. It was a cousin, Emily, I think, who finally turned and said, "Patricia, you coming?" But by then, the shutter had clicked, the pose held, and the moment immortalized without me. "It's fine," I said, waving off the awkwardness. "I'm probably not on their social media list anyway." Back at the table, dinner had started. I picked at a salad while conversations unfolded around me like I wasn't there. People shared updates on mortgages, private school waiting lists, holiday plans to Napa. Someone asked if I was still doing that nonprofit thing in the city. I said yes. They nodded like I'd mentioned a hobby, not a career. Callista stood with a glass in hand. It was her turn to speak. "To my wonderful parents," she began, her voice clear and smooth, like she'd practiced in front of a mirror. "We all took different paths. Some of us chose family, others chose projects." Laughter scattered politely around the room. She went on to brag about Lucian's acceptance into Columbia, about her ex-husband who continued to support the kids so gracefully, about how grateful she was for community and tradition. None of those words included me. I looked down at my wine, still untouched, still red. Then came the backhanded introductions. "You're the sister from New York, right?" a man at the table asked me. "The one who left?" I gave him the kind of smile I reserve for customer service calls. Something like that. But in my head, I finished the sentence. I didn't leave. I was let go. I didn't bring a speech. I didn't stand to toast. Years ago, I'd been told not to speak at a similar event because my tone was a little too direct, that my honesty made people uncomfortable. This time, I brought silence. Not because I had nothing to say, but because showing up was my speech. Sometimes presence is protest. Toward the end of the meal, as guests began moving to dessert tables and forming new circles, Lucian drifted over. He was taller now, his hair messier than the last time I saw him. A little less polished than Callista preferred. He stopped a few feet from me, shifting on his heels. Miss Patricia," I turned to him, trying to read his expression. "You look really, real." I blinked. "Real?" He nodded quickly. "Yeah, like, everyone else is so." He glanced toward the crowd. "Shiny! You're not trying so hard. It's cool." I didn't expect it. Not from him. Not here. And for a moment, I forgot how much I had been erased, because someone still saw me. "Depends," I told her, holding her gaze without blinking. "Which part was real? Callista didn't flinch. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but had all the smugness of one. You know how these things go. People say things. It's all just family fun. Family fun. That was what she called it. Mockery with hors d'oeuvres. I stepped past her without replying, making my way back into the ballroom as the clinking of forks against dessert plates signaled the next phase of the evening. A string quartet resumed playing something delicate and forgettable in the corner. My seat was still untouched. So was my wine. I sat down, my back straight, hands folded neatly in my lap, and waited. I could feel eyes flick toward me, some curious, some confused. Maybe a few realized by now that I wasn't just an extra in the background of their curated celebration. Then the microphone squealed slightly, catching everyone's attention. The host tapped it twice before announcing, "Now a few words from Callista Langley, eldest daughter of the Langley family." I took a slow sip, bracing. She walked up to the podium with the grace of someone who knew exactly how to command a room and how to use a microphone like a scalpel. Her voice was syrupy and clear. "We've all taken different journeys," she began, eyes sweeping across the room. "Some of us have chosen to build families, others have followed their passions." That pause, that glance in my direction, that perfectly timed chuckle after. She kept going, touching on Lucian's achievements, how proud she was to have raised a future Ivy Leaguer. She thanked her ex-husband for continuing to co-parent with grace. She spoke of tradition, of carrying forward her parents' legacy, but she never once said my name. As the applause echoed, I reached for my napkin to steady my hands. Not from nerves, just fury, tightly leashed. Someone leaned toward me from 2 seats away, a woman I vaguely remembered from a past fundraiser. "It's amazing," she whispered. "What you did for Callista when her husband lost his job. That kind of quiet strength, that's what holds families together." I turned my head slowly. "Sorry?" She smiled, a little unsure now. "You paid their mortgage, didn't you? For almost a year?" I blinked. "Did she tell you that?" Her face froze. "Oh, I thought she didn't mention it?" "No," I said, softly but clearly. "She didn't." The truth hit me harder than her speech had. Not just that she took the help, but that she took credit for surviving without ever mentioning who kept the lights on. I stood, needing air. As I walked out onto the stone terrace again, I passed 2 hotel staff near the side doors. They didn't notice me at first. "She's not wearing her usual," one said. "That's gotta be borrowed." "Last minute," the other added. "They said it wasn't even tailored." They weren't talking about me. I turned my head slightly and caught the direction of their glance, toward Callista, laughing by the dessert table in a dress that had looked like designer couture under ballroom lighting, but now, under the garden strings, showed its seams. Even her show had cracks. It didn't make me feel better. Not exactly. But it settled something. A new kind of clarity. I wasn't invisible. I was edited out. I pulled my phone from my clutch and texted Milas. "Don't leave yet. I may need a ride, or a witness." A moment later, I turned to head back inside. Callista was waiting for me just beyond the door, standing with one foot angled toward the crowd, the other toward me. Like she couldn't decide if she wanted to keep performing or confront me. She tilted her head, eyes too sweet to be real. "Still enjoying the show?" I didn't blink. "Depends," I said. "Which part was real?" She didn't answer my question. Of course not. She just smiled and turned back toward the crowd, like I'd asked her what time it was. The music had softened again, and the MC's voice rang out, crisp and cheerful. "Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is served." I lingered for a second, giving her space to disappear into her admirers. I wasn't going to follow her trail of perfume and compliments. Not anymore. As guests began filing toward their seats, I stepped aside, watching the wave of motion settle into neatly arranged tables. Names were printed on small cards, folded like tents, each one delicately placed, a sign of who mattered and how much. I hovered nearby, waiting to hear my name called. A pause. A glance. Some indication that there was a place set for me. But it never came. A server, barely older than Lucian, approached hesitantly. Ms. Langley? I looked at him, jaw clenched. You're actually at table 16, he said, eyes flicking down to his list. Right over there, near the hallway. I followed the direction he pointed, walking past clusters of relatives and friends, laughing at inside jokes I was never part of. Table 16 sat near the service entrance, partly obscured by a large floral arrangement. There were 2 elderly cousins already seated, a woman I didn't recognize, and 3 empty chairs. I wasn't just seated away. I was placed out of frame. The food began arriving, salads first, then a chilled soup in delicate glass bowls. I reached for my water, my fingers brushing condensation, when I heard her voice again. Careful with the desserts. Callista. I turned to find her right beside me, smiling as she pretended to fix the cuff on her dress. Some of us can't bounce back like we used to. The words sliced through the air like a knife dipped in sugar. It wasn't loud, but it was just loud enough. 2 guests looked over. One of them laughed, then looked down as if they hadn't meant to. I locked eyes with her, held them. You're right, I said evenly. Some of us don't pretend anymore. Her smile faltered, just slightly, but she recovered fast. Too fast. She breezed away before I could add more. A woman across from me, someone who'd sat next to my mother earlier, leaned in. Callista always worries about you, she said softly. She just wants you healthy. I forced a breath through my nose. Not a laugh, not a sigh. Just release. She doesn't want me healthy, I said, keeping my voice low. She wants me small, easier to ignore. I stood then, gently pushing back my chair and stepping out into the hallway, where the air was cooler and no one was looking. I leaned against the wall, the curve of plaster cool against my back, and reached into my clutch for my phone. The folder labeled, "Just in case," was still there. Tapped open, it revealed a collection of documents. Property records, trust fund revisions, signed contracts, all with my name. All quietly forgotten, like I had been. I stared at them for a while, then closed the screen. Lucian's voice carried faintly from the doorway. I don't get why Mom treats her that way, he was saying. Trish is cooler than all of them. I turned my head just enough to see his profile lit by the warm glow of a wall sconce. He wasn't talking to me, but it didn't matter. For the first time all night, I didn't feel like I was surviving the evening. I felt like I was reclaiming it. I stepped back into the ballroom, not slowly, not with hesitation. I walked like someone who had nothing to prove, but everything to remind them of. The lights inside had dimmed slightly as I stepped back into the hallway. Conversations buzzed in corners. Laughter trickled like wine. But the pulse of the room had shifted. Something quieter now, more aware. Like the party had sensed a shift in current, but hadn't figured out where the storm was coming from. I wasn't looking for attention, but I didn't duck from it either. Near the exit to the catering corridor, a staff member approached. Clipboard in hand, brow furrowed like he was solving a math problem on paper. Excuse me, ma'am, he said, tapping a sheet. Are you the event lead? The rental contract lists your name. I blinked. For a second, I thought he had the wrong person. Then I remembered. Yes, I said calmly. I am. He smiled, visibly relieved. Great. Just needed a quick signature to confirm the last invoice for lighting adjustments and the floral extension you approved this morning. He held out a pen. I took it. There it was, printed clearly across the top of the form. Patricia Langley, primary sponsor. Langley Grant Trust. No Callista. No co-chair. No shared credits. Just my name. I handed the form back, offered a simple nod, and walked toward the main ballroom, past clusters of servers in black ties and white gloves. One of them paused mid-step and murmured, "Evening, Ms. Langley." That was new. Inside, the atmosphere hadn't changed on the surface, But the undercurrent was different. I could feel it in the way people glanced and then looked again, half curious, half questioning, like they suddenly realized I wasn't just an estranged sister who'd shown up in a handmade dress. I didn't stop to explain. I didn't need to. By the far wall, Melis caught my eye. She stepped into my path, her face more alert now. "You okay?" she asked. "You look different." I let out a quiet laugh. "I'm remembering who I am." She grinned. "That's dangerous, you know, especially in this room." I leaned closer. "Good." We both smiled, real ones this time. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Callista moving toward us. Her posture was perfect, her lipstick untouched. She wore the same practiced expression that had carried her through magazine covers and charity galas, but something behind her eyes shifted when she saw the exchange between me and Melis. She reached us with her usual grace, voice like syrup warmed just right. "You're glowing tonight," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Someone have a little crush?" I stared at her. "No," I said, tone even. "Just good lighting and financial leverage." Her smile tightened. That mask never cracked easily, but it thinned when pressed. I didn't wait for a comeback. I turned and walked across the ballroom, letting her watch me this time. As I passed the central photo booth, I slowed. There was a large poster mounted beside it. "Thank you to our sponsors." Gold letters, floral trim, and beneath it, a list of names. Callista Langley PR. The foundation. A couple of business partners I recognized from old family events, but no mention of the Langley Grant Trust. No mention of me. It was bold, or maybe it was desperate. I stood there for a long moment, letting the insult settle the way salt settles on a fresh wound. Not deep, but stinging. Then I pulled out my phone. If they won't say it, I will. I didn't press send, yet. Instead, I lowered my phone and slid it into my clutch, letting the decision sit on my tongue a moment longer. Not because I was second-guessing, but because I wanted to savor it. There's a particular silence that settles in your bones when you realize you don't need anyone's permission to tell the truth. Before I could move, Melis appeared at my side. She didn't say anything at first. She just handed me her phone. "You might want to see this." I glanced at the screen. A TikTok video was paused at the 10-second mark. I tapped play. There it was. Clear audio, shaky video. Callista's voice drifting through laughter like a dagger. "Careful with the desserts. Some of us can't bounce back like we used to." A quick pan to faces stiffening. A tight laugh. My own profile, turning slightly, holding steady. The caption read, "Wait, did she just say that to her sister?" View count, 28.7K. And rising. I exhaled, but not from surprise. From confirmation. "She did," I murmured. Melis nodded. "It's spreading. People are sharing it like wildfire." A few tables away, I saw a group of younger guests looking at their phones, then back at me. Whispers. Shifted glances. Something was unraveling. A server stopped near our table, hesitant. "Ms. Langley?" His voice dropped lower. "We've had 3 walkouts. Guests said they saw the video and didn't want to be associated." I nodded once. "That's not my fire," I said quietly. "I didn't light it. But I won't put it out either." He blinked, then backed away without another word. I stood and walked toward the back lounge area, smaller, dimmer, and more private. The noise of the ballroom dulled behind heavy curtains. A man I recognized from the hotel's AV team hovered by the door, pretending to scroll through his phone. As I passed, he glanced up and whispered, "There's something you should have, off the record." He handed me a small flash drive, already loaded. Security footage from the last gala. I wasn't sure if it meant anything, but now, I think it does. I thanked him. My hands didn't shake. I didn't ask questions. I just walked to the nearest table, pulled out my laptop, and opened the folder labeled "Just in Case." One video showed Callista accidentally smudging the ink on my speech cards at a donor brunch 2 years ago. Another, her slipping behind the podium to check the mic moments before my mic went dead mid-sentence. And here, I thought I was clumsy. I took my time. I combined the documents I'd compiled earlier, the trust fund signatures, the event sponsor forms, the digital receipts, with the video from TikTok and the flash drive clips. Labeled the folder, zipped it, and drafted an email. Subject: for the record, not revenge. Recipients: a quiet list. Board members: 2 sponsors. 1 journalist I trusted. I hit send. Then I returned to the cocktail bar, left my phone unlocked, screen tilted up. The video played silently in a loop. If they wanted to talk, they would. If they wanted to ask, they'd find their answers. Callista walked by 10 minutes later. She didn't see me at first. She saw herself, on the screen. Froze mid-step. Her face didn't crack. It collapsed, slow and sharp. She turned to me, voice low and tight. "What did you do?" I picked up my glass, took a sip, and looked her square in the eye. "I stopped erasing myself," I said. "That's all." She didn't say another word, just turned and disappeared into the crowd like she always did, when she didn't have control of the narrative. The lounge grew quiet again as the video kept looping on the screen. I didn't stop it. I didn't need to. One of the sponsors approached a few minutes later, gesturing toward the gallery outside the ballroom. "They've put up a donor display in the corridor. You should come see it." I followed him out past the bar, into the long marble-floored hallway where small framed photos lined the walls. A headline in ornate gold font read, "Impact in Action, Celebrating Those Who Give Back." The 4th photo in the line made me stop cold. It was me, 5 years younger, in jeans and a damp hoodie, handing out boxed meals at a shelter downtown. Tired, no makeup, hair pulled back. The photo was candid. Someone had taken it without me noticing. I remembered that night clearly. It was one of the hardest months of my life. I'd just sold my apartment to keep a nonprofit program running. I was volunteering because I couldn't afford to sit still. Below the photo was a glossy plaque, Callista Langley Foundation, Ground Impact Work. That photo was taken without my consent. A friend of Callista's, a woman from her donor circle, stepped beside me. "It was such a great campaign year," she said. "That image was everywhere. Callista said you were fine with it." I turned to her slowly. "I wasn't asked." She blinked, uncertain. "Oh, I just assumed." "You assumed right. I was broke. I wasn't doing it for anyone's press release. That moment was survival, not branding." Her face reddened slightly, and she backed away without another word. Behind me, a familiar voice piped up. "Wait." Lucien. I turned as he stepped forward, wide-eyed and caught between childhood loyalty and truth. "Mom didn't tell them it was you? You're the one who pulled me out of the street that day." Several people nearby went still. His voice hadn't been loud, but it didn't need to be. "She didn't," I replied, without looking away from him. "But you just did." He bit his lip, unsure what to say next. I didn't need him to say anything. The room was already shifting. "She never mentioned Patricia helped," someone whispered. "That's the same photo she used in the awards press," said another. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I watched it all unfold like a slow domino fall, truth knocking down carefully arranged illusions. I had no intention of stopping it. Suddenly, Callista's heels clicked across the marble. She stormed into the gallery, her voice sharper than I'd heard it all night. "You think this is some kind of payback?" she hissed, her eyes gleaming like glass on the edge of shatter. I tilted my head. "No," I said. "It's revelation. Different thing." "You want to destroy me?" I almost laughed. "I don't have to," I replied. "You're doing fine on your own." She looked like she wanted to slap me, or hug me, maybe both. But instead, she turned, arms folded tightly, and stood in place like a statue, unwilling to face the cracks forming in her base. Milas joined me at the edge of the corridor. She didn't ask for details. She never did. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, "You ready?" I glanced at my phone. A notification blinked across the screen. Interview scheduled. Patricia Langley, legacy donor. Press tent, 9:45 p.m. I turned to Malus, let a small smile stretch across my face. Let's make sure they spell my name right this time. The interview was scheduled for 9:45, but by 9:40, I was already walking toward the ballroom stage. I hadn't planned it this way. I hadn't rehearsed a speech. But there was a pressure in the air, thick, expectant, and I felt it pressing between my shoulder blades like a steady hand guiding me forward. If they wanted a show, I decided they'd get one. But this time, I'd write the script. The MC had just begun his closing remarks when I stepped into the wings. His voice echoed smoothly through the microphone, thanking donors, partners, and the committee. He read from the updated list, finely updated. And lastly, he said, pausing just enough for the audience to still, a very special thank you to Patricia Langley and the Langley Grant Trust, without whom this evening wouldn't be possible. There it was. Gasps, a few muffled reactions. I saw heads swivel. I felt the shift without looking. Isolde, seated near the center, blinked once and looked down. Callista! Callista didn't move at all. Her smile stayed, but it was frozen. Waxed in place like something meant for display, not function. I didn't wait for a cue. I walked up the side stairs, took the mic from the MC gently. He looked at me, surprised, but he stepped back. Thank you, I began. My voice didn't shake. Tonight isn't about being seen. It's about finally refusing to disappear. The room went still. I scanned the crowd, slowly, not searching for anyone in particular, but making sure they all saw me. I've been quiet for years. Some people assumed it was humility. Others mistook it for weakness. But silence, I said, isn't peace. It's exile. A few people shifted in their seats. I kept going. And exile ends tonight. Somewhere near the second row, Callista moved. She stood, her mouth open, just barely. I didn't stop. For too long, I let people speak over me, around me, for me. I let others wear my effort like a costume while I stood in the shadows, uninvited. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was told not to ruin the moment. Someone in the back coughed, a single awkward noise in a sea of quiet. I turned slightly toward Callista. You've had the microphone long enough, I said, not cruelly, but clearly. Tonight, I take it back. She sat down. I let the pause settle. Then I finished. I didn't come back to take revenge. I came back to take my name. A beat. And tonight, that name no longer fits under your shadow. I stepped away from the mic. No dramatic bow, no performative smile, just silence, the thick, weighted kind that follows truth. I walked down the center aisle. I didn't look behind me. Until I heard it. One clap. Lucienne. Then another. And then more, scattered, unsure, but genuine. Not for a performance, not for a polished lie, but for something honest, even if uncomfortable. Callista didn't clap. She didn't move. Her eyes stayed forward, locked on nothing. And me? I walked out, not triumphant, but grounded. As I moved through the split room, past rows of familiar and unfamiliar faces, I felt no need for applause. Because when the truth finally stands up, it doesn't need applause. It needs room. The heavy ballroom doors clicked shut behind me, sealing the applause and tension in one echoing thud. The hallway beyond felt cooler, wide, still, and lined with silence too thick to ignore. I kept walking, each step echoing against polished floors that had seen too many versions of me over the years. Daughter, disappointment, and now, something else entirely. The silence after truth is louder than any applause, and far more revealing. People turned their heads as I passed, no longer out of politeness or curiosity, but something weightier. Respect, maybe, or realization. Even the staff seemed different now. A woman by the coat room nodded slowly as I passed, her eyes soft but intentional. No words, no smile, just acknowledgement. No one touched me, no one dared, because once you stand in truth, you're radioactive, beautifully untouchable. Outside, the air had cooled further, the valet circle buzzing softly with idling engines and casual conversation. Milas appeared by my side again, seemingly out of nowhere, her usual calm woven with something close to awe. "You good?" she asked, her tone gentle but steady. I didn't answer right away. One of Callista's longtime donors, a man who used to pretend not to know my name, approached with a glass of bourbon in one hand. "You changed the room tonight," he said, "and trust me, the trust could use women like you." I shook his hand, keeping my voice even. "I'm not looking for validation, just alignment." He smiled, more genuine than I expected. "You got it." Just then, the glass doors behind us opened, and Callista stepped out. Her stride had slowed, her expression carefully rehearsed, but the cracks were showing. Her supervisor followed close behind with two other members of her firm, faces tight, clipped words exchanged under breath. He turned to me. "We had no idea," he said. "You deserved credit." Then he looked at Callista. "Let's schedule a conversation. First thing Monday." Her shoulders dropped just enough to be noticeable. Not defeated, but dented. I turned away, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Let her learn what I had to carry for years. There is no armor against exposure. Near the valet stand, she fumbled with her clutch and checked her reflection in a side mirror. Her necklace caught the light, only it didn't glint like it had earlier. One of the stones was missing. A valet whispered to another, "Looks cheap, like costume jewelry." I heard it, didn't flinch. Instead, I handed my valet ticket to the young man in a red jacket. He took it with a quiet nod. Melis joined me near the car. Neither of us spoke until the headlights pulled around. "I didn't need them to clap," I said. "I needed them to see." "They saw," she replied, "and they'll never unsee it." My car pulled up, engine humming low. I opened the door and slid in. As the door closed and I settled back, my phone lit up with a new message. From Mom, "We need to talk. Come by tomorrow." I didn't type a response. I didn't even open the thread. I just looked ahead, through the windshield, at the dark road stretching out from the circle drive. Because when you stop chasing validation, you start leading the narrative. Morning came with that sticky Charleston heat that clung to everything. Your clothes, your breath, your thoughts. I'd barely slept. My phone, face down on the bedside table, still hadn't been touched since the message from Mom. But the day didn't wait, and neither did the brunch that followed the chaos of the night before. By 10 a.m., the garden behind the family estate was buzzing with well-heeled guests, balancing tiny quiches and fruit skewers on paper-thin china. White tablecloths fluttered in the breeze, and servers in khaki vests refilled champagne glasses like nothing explosive had unfolded 12 hours earlier. I didn't wear green this time. A navy shift dress, flat sandals, hair pulled back, clean, simple, honest. Lucienne caught my eye across the lawn, then ducked behind the AV table. A minute later, the large screen flickered on. I'd forgotten there was a tribute slideshow planned. Honestly, I'd expected them to cancel it after everything, but apparently the schedule must go on, even if the story had changed. The screen lit up with soft instrumental music, a reel of family photos rolling by. My parents' wedding, baby pictures of Callista and me, a few awkward Thanksgiving shots. Then Lucian's voice filled the space. "My mom told me I should keep this short, but I just want to thank someone who doesn't get thanked enough." I froze mid-bite. "My Aunt Patricia," he said, clear as day. "She believed in me when I was failing school. When everyone else thought I was just lazy or distracted, she listened." A ripple passed through the guests. "I wouldn't be at Columbia without her." There was no applause, just a soft exhale that rolled through the crowd like someone had opened a window. I didn't look at Callista. I didn't need to. People shifted in their seats. Some leaned in to whisper. Others simply turned their heads toward me. Milas, seated beside me, reached under the table and gave my hand the lightest squeeze. A few minutes later, the buffet line began forming, and I slipped toward the hedges, away from the chatter. I needed air. Something real. That's when I heard a voice I hadn't expected. Patricia! I turned. It was her ex-husband, Jeff. I hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. He rubbed the back of his neck. I never said it properly. I didn't speak. Let him say whatever he'd been holding. Thank you for covering the rent when I lost my job, for helping with Lucian. She never told anyone it was you. I nodded once. That was enough. He lingered like he wanted to say more. Then he gave a slight, grateful nod and walked away. When I returned to the table, the shift was clear. People no longer avoided my eyes. Some offered smiles. Others stopped pretending they didn't know what had happened. Callista stood near the rose archway, alone. Her phone in hand, screen glowing. She scrolled, locked it, unlocked it again. Her jaw set, lips pursed. Her silence, for once, had no control. It wasn't strategic. It was exposure, and she didn't know how to sit inside it. After dessert, I excused myself and walked the garden path that curved behind the estate. The same one I used to take as a teenager when the house felt too loud. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't need to. I didn't need to win, I whispered to myself. I just needed the lies to lose. I reached the front gate, ready to leave unnoticed, when a woman in a crisp blazer approached. Ms. Langley? I turned. She smiled, held out a card. We're from the Women's Foundation of South Carolina. We'd like you to speak at our fall gala. Women like you, they don't just recover, they redefine the room. I didn't speak, just smiled. The gates opened. The gates closed behind me with a slow, deliberate thud, like a punctuation mark on a sentence I didn't realize I'd been writing for years. I held the card from the foundation between 2 fingers, letting it sway with the breeze as I walked to my car. I didn't drive home. Not right away. I went to the house I hadn't stepped into in nearly 4 years. My mother's. By the time I pulled up to the wraparound porch, the sun had dipped low enough to stretch the shadows across the lawn. Everything looked the same. The planters on the steps, the chipped paint on the banister that Callista always said we'd fix and never did. Same wind chimes by the kitchen window, still too loud, still clanging like an argument that didn't know when to stop. I parked and took a breath before walking up. No bags, no flowers, just me. The door was unlocked, always was. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and the old rose soap my mother still insisted on keeping by every sink. The family pictures still lined the hallway. Callista in her homecoming dress, me in a choir robe I never wanted to wear, our parents smiling too wide to be believable. The hallway didn't feel haunted, just tired. She was in the back garden, as if she knew I'd show. I didn't say anything at first, neither did she. We sat across from each other, a small table between us. The kind of table that once held iced tea and bridge cards, but now only carried silence. She poured tea anyway. The ritual was older than either of our resentments. Last night, she said finally, her voice more gravel than air. You surprised me? I nodded. I surprised myself. She looked down into her cup. I let her speak for this family too long. I should have said something years ago. You didn't, I said, not cruelly, just fact. I silenced you because it was easier than defending you, and I told myself you didn't mind. I minded. She didn't apologize, not directly, but her voice cracked a little. You were always more than how she made you feel. I see that now. It took everything in me not to scoff, but I didn't. You weren't supposed to protect me from her, I said. You were supposed to see me through her. She nodded slowly. I see you now. A breeze moved through the trees, shaking the leaves just enough to make them sound like a slow wave coming ashore. We didn't speak for a while. Some wounds don't close. They just stop bleeding. I stood, brushing non-existent crumbs from my lap. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, "but I'm not staying for dinner." She didn't try to stop me, just watched me gather nothing but my own composure. I was halfway down the brick path when her voice came, soft but sharp enough to find me. "You were always the strong one," she called. "I just didn't want it to be true." I stopped, just for a second, then kept walking. Because healing doesn't always mean returning, it can also mean continuing. 2 weeks later, I stood backstage in a historic theater in downtown Charleston. Brick walls, velvet curtains, and the faint scent of old wood and new beginnings. This wasn't a family event. No one in the audience knew my sister's voice or my mother's silences. They only knew the version of me listed on the program, Patricia Langley, keynote speaker. I didn't return to be loved again. I came back to remember that I already was, just not by them. The crowd was mostly women, professionals, organizers, students, leaders in tailored jackets and natural curls. I scanned the room through the slit in the curtain. They weren't here for gossip or spectacle. They were here because they believed in reinvention. A volunteer straightened my microphone as a board member stepped forward to introduce me. "Please welcome tonight's keynote, Patricia Langley, Executive Director, silent benefactor, and a woman who chose integrity over image." The applause wasn't thunderous. It was warm, present, real. I walked onto the stage with calm steps and steady breath. No heels, no jewelry screaming for attention. Just me. And for once, that was enough. "I used to think silence kept me safe," I began. I was wrong. Silence just keeps your name off the list. A few people nodded. Others leaned in. I kept my eyes moving, row to row, finding connection without needing control. I let people write my story for a long time. Some chapters were flattering, others weren't, but none of them were mine. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. "What I learned," I said, "is that not every battle has to end in fire. Sometimes standing in your truth long enough burns everything that doesn't belong." After the final applause, I stepped off stage lighter. Not empty, just clearer. A staffer approached with a small envelope. "This came in weeks ago," she said, "from your father. He left it with the foundation and asked us to give it to you when you were ready." My breath caught, not in grief, but surprise. Inside was a letter, his handwriting, slanted, neat. "To the daughter who hid her light so others could shine. Your time is now." That was all. I folded the letter once, placed it in my bag. Didn't cry. Outside, the night was still humid. Charleston never fully letting go of summer. As I reached the front steps, reporters stood near the curb. Flashbulbs popped, not for the dress, but the story. I didn't pose, just smiled, soft, measured, whole. She tried to erase me, but all she did was underline me. A voice called out as I reached the sidewalk. A girl, no older than 16, stood holding a notepad. "Ms. Langley, what would you tell your younger self?" I paused, then said, "Don't shrink to fit. They'll never build a box big enough for you anyway." Because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about finally choosing the right story to believe in.